Have you ever been in a meeting where everyone around you is using phrases like circling back or drilling down or following up, and you feel like you're missing out on the meaning? You know the words, you know what circle means, you know what back means, but circle and back together create a new hidden meaning. To circle back is a common business idiom. It means to return to a topic, conversation, or a person at a later time to revisit with updates in the next steps. For many of the English learning professionals I work with, why use circle back? Why not use a simpler one-word synonym like revisit or postpone? When your native-speaking colleagues use these phrasal verbs, it can sometimes create a kind of fear of missing out. It's a FOMO, a social fear. While you're translating literally what the phrases mean, the conversation may have moved on. So in this video, I'm going to show you how do phrasal verbs work, how to study them, and how to follow them in everyday conversations. This series is based on my book, Big World Legends. Welcome to episode 3 on the fear of missing out and other phrasal verbs. And if you would like more of this, get a free copy of the whole book. Click below and use the code episode 3 at checkout. So let's jump in. About once a week, I hear a student say something like, I have no problem using the English of my technical job, but when it comes to just socializing and hanging out with my native-speaking colleagues, I can get lost in casual conversations. How could it be that after studying English for so many years, reaching an advanced level, and then getting a job in English, you can still feel lost in just everyday conversations, but you have no problem doing the work of your day-to-day job? By this point, you already understand that English can be so confusing and tricky, and this is largely because it will take the system and rules from one language and use the system and rules of another language for the same phrase or word. For example, the word colonel in English uses the Italian spelling, but the French pronunciation? Originally, things were not so confusing. At its 5th century roots, English used to be a simpler language. Back then, English offered way fewer options in the vocabulary for someone to be able to describe the world around them. So English speakers added prepositions, words like at, on, in, to, from. They added those words to verbs in order to alter or slightly change or completely change the meaning. For example, to look at someone is to see them. But if you change at for up to, those two prepositions, it changes the meaning completely. To look up to someone, not look at someone. To look up to someone means to respect them or admire them as a role model. This is why when you add a preposition to a verb in English, it often changes the meaning. For example, to shut means to close, but to shut down means to take off power or to come offline. To shut up means to silence, and to shut in means to lock someone or something inside somewhere, like a room. So just changing the preposition from shut, shut down, shut in, shut up, the meaning changes. These phrases are actually ancient, and they come from the more Germanic roots of the language. It wasn't until the Norman conquest of the English-speaking world in 1066 did English begin to get a lot of words from French. So now we have the word admire in addition to look up to, or the word applaud in addition to cheer on. This period is known as the Great Vowel Shift, and during this time the English language absorbed a ton of the French language and Latinate influence. And today in modern English, about 30% of the language comes from French, Greek, and Latin origins. So in a way, English kind of has two foundations. One is the more Germanic foundation, where we get phrasal verbs, and the second foundation came during the Great Vowel Shift, and this is where we get a ton of the French, Latin, and Greek vocabulary that you might actually already know if your first language is French or Spanish or Italian or a Romance language. These one-word Latinate verbs, such as applaud and admire, are often used in more formal contexts, such as school and work. And if you learned English mostly in academic settings, then your training may have focused mostly on these vocabulary. So today in your job, those verbs might feel safer for you to use at work. But here's the problem. In the real world, native speakers or expert English speakers just grabbing a coffee or getting lunch are going to intersperse phrasal verbs with other Latinate synonyms, depending on their intention or what they're trying to communicate and how. Notice the difference between these two emails. Here's the first one. Hi, John. I hope we can make this deal happen. Could you please send me the updated client report by this Friday? We need to increase our sales. Thanks for your hard work. I was just telling Marco how much I appreciate you. Nothing wrong with this paragraph. It's a great paragraph. But look at this paragraph. Hi, John. I hope we can make this deal work out. Could you please shoot over the updated client report by this Friday? We need to pick it up with our sales. Thanks for your hard work. I was just talking you up to Marco. Which email do you understand better? Which one sounds and feels more natural to you? So if you don't feel comfortable yet fully with phrasal verbs, then you will feel lost in the exact same email. Like all verbs, phrasal verbs sometimes take objects and sometimes don't. For example, please shoot over the report. The report is the object. It's the thing we're shooting over. But some phrasal verbs don't use objects. For example, fell through. Our plans fell through. The subject, our plans, the phrasal verb fell through, period. There's no object. To fall through means when something doesn't take place or doesn't happen. For example, we had plans to go on vacation, but because of the weather, they fell through. So if you say, I will investigate and conclude the report, technically that is correct, but it also sounds a little stiff and robotic. Sometimes you might need to sound stiff and academic, and then you should use investigate, not look into, and you should use conclude, not wrap it up. But if you're not trying to sound stiff and you're actually trying to sound casual and you want to just connect, still professionally, I'll look into it, not I'll investigate it. So in conclusion, phrasal verbs can be one of the best ways that you can connect with other people casually, but still professionally. So you want to practice by building sentences and by writing emails and by putting together memos and briefs, actually doing the work of your day-to-day life, but play with changing out verbs for phrasal verbs. See how does it feel to use a phrasal verb and say, I'm really looking up to him instead of I respect him. Sometimes it will be better to use one over the other, and it depends mostly on the formality or the technicality of your work. In general, if you're being more technical, you will typically use more of the Greek, French, Latinate verbs, the one-word verbs. But phrasal verbs are everywhere. You can use them formally, you can use them informally. The difference is for you to explore which one feels best when you're building a sentence. To give you a lot more practice with this, in Chapter 3 of my book, Big World Legends, you will find a download of the top 25 most common phrasal verbs in the English language, with their definitions and example sentences, and how to practice them. So as always, thanks again for joining me today. My name is Richard. This is Big World Legends. I'll see you in the next episode, New Kids on the Block.